Hi, I'm Merrylin LeBlanc, astrologer here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And today we have an interesting topic, don't we, Michael?
We do. I'm Michael Bartlett here in Santa Fe as well. We're here with deep dives with new perspectives. And if you like our YouTubes, please subscribe and please do a little thumbs up like, and please feel free to share as much as you like. Yeah, what's bugging me lately is this whole thing about fake news. It's like there's just so much information being put out there in so many different levels that's gullible for, it's just like it's almost like it's custom designed for every single person.
And why do you think that's so? I mean, what does astrology tell you about fake news?
Well, I
Or
mean,
marketing?
yeah, for one, I mean, I see like with Neptune and in Pisces, I see that as like, the great dream in which we all are. And so I think it's real easy to kind of see things from whatever our own viewpoint are. But I think that the Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and previously Mercury dance going in Capricorn, because it's funny, with Pluto in there, you talk about a lot with the plutocrats, but it's, in a way, it's like it dismantles that Capricorn energy. But there's also this way that there's that insidious nature of Pluto, isn't there, where it can kind of go in and it can strengthen things that really, we like to think that Pluto takes away things that aren't necessary, but then the question would be like, well, why are these people in companies and organizations taking advantage of people and continually being able to do it, right?
Well, that's gone on throughout history. for a fact. And actually, when we look at the last time that Pluto was in Capricorn, the sign of structures and governments and rulers, kings, presidents, whomever, it was during the time of the American Revolution, and so the kind of structure, what it's doing, I think, is offering a purification process to of what kind of structure, what kind of overall structure on a larger level, in terms of community, do you want to live in that actually supports your evolution as a community? I mean, that's another way of looking at it, and I mean, we could go back to American Revolution and say, well, the colonists felt like they wanted to have a say in how they were taxed, what they were able to do with the resources they had available to them in the colonies, and they had no representation. So, that led to the revolution on their part. And today we have we're caught in a tug of war between people who want to have everything privatized, meaning people should earn whatever they get, whatever they're able to have on their own. The government, meaning our taxes put into the government, should not be supporting people's lives.
Right.
And then other people are saying, yeah, but stuff happens.
Like
I
right
mean,
now.
sometimes a child's parent or parents die, and there should be some means of supporting that child into adulthood, which is an element of Social Security. Actually, yeah, I've known people. Well, actually, I think it was Paul Ryan. Was that his name? The former House Speaker of the House, the Republican from Michigan or Wisconsin, one of those states up there. And I remember him telling the story about his father dying. I believe he was a teenager. I could have some of the details incorrect. And if it wasn't for Social Security, they would have been like, without food and shelter. I mean, the situation was pretty dire from how he described it, which always puzzled me, because he seemed to, at the time that he was Speaker of the House, and I don't know what he's doing these days, um, he seemed to be buying into this kind of agenda of privatizing as much as possible. You know, I keep thinking, you know, there's these legislators who do that. On the other hand, they're making a very good salary on taxpayer money. And I just kind of don't understand how they take this stance. And when he would get on his soapbox, I used to say, yeah, well, what would have happened to your family without Social Security when you were a kid or a teenager? Still a kid. Anyway, sorry,
Well,
teenagers.
in a sense, you know, that's kind of the, you know, and that's an aspect of the fake system, because it's the fake news is because this idea, you know, we have this idealism in the United States around certain ways of being. Oh, you know, like in the past, I mean, I don't think it's been really recently, but, you know, being a white male, for instance, you know, has been really kind of like an idealized thing. And so I think a lot of this fake news is around trying to keep that fake image present. And I think that's where that's where I'm seeing that Pluto part come in, because there's the power aspect of Pluto trying to come in and manipulate it. You know, the things, you know, a few years ago, you know, before this even happened, what I was realizing the Republicans were doing was this thing called three mistruths, and it's the truth. You know, you make a statement three times, and then all of a sudden it becomes, you know, the fact, because you said it three times publicly. So therefore, that's where it's been. You self-reference
It
yourself.
must be the reality.
Yeah, it must be
No,
the
no
reality.
critical thinking needed, none whatsoever.
Exactly. And then, you know, and then we come up to this president where it's just, I mean, you know, through this convention, through everything that's going on. You know, taking people's people who have done videos who are receiving support from the state and saying like how that's helping them, and taking that without any authorization and using that at the Republican National Convention to further saying that, oh, that I support people of color and I want to help keep people in homes. No, you don't. I mean, it's like, you know, it's this grand, you know, this fluff, you know, that's being sold to the American
Oh,
people.
it's the spin. And there used to be a
Right.
TV show, was it in the 70s, called Spin or something of that sort, where, and this is kind of Jupiter and Neptune together, where you exaggerate in order to do a con job on people, or to get people to see your version as versus all the other kinds of versions. But the fake news, well, it involves Jupiter and Neptune as well, but I couldn't help but think about Pluto and Neptune in terms of, uh, well, and it actually brings in a little bit of Mercury, although that moves very fast, in terms of the denial of something, of making something dark and sinister and not as positive as it can be. And when I think about the cycle of Neptune and Pluto, it's a 500-year cycle. The cycle we're in is still in its early stages. It's going in and out of its crescent. Well, it's in its crescent phase for sure. It's going in and out of what we call a septile and a sextile. It's in a sextile right now. 60, not quite 60 degrees, but well, 60 degrees in and out these months. This cycle began in the sign of Gemini, the twins, the neighbors. And if you think of the mythology of Gemini, there's, you know, the brother pitted against the other brother. I mean, there's fratricide in that mythology. And that's sort of, you know, if we're in the crescent, it's sort of what's happening. The crescent phase is a time when one knows that things have changed. And so we're talking about, this started near the end of the what do they call it? Deconstruction era, you know, when the Jim Crow laws were in full force, instead of actually giving the freedom that Blacks deserved after the Civil War. And you kind of see this. I mean, you know, if we take that, you know, this is applied not just to Blacks versus whites or whites versus Blacks. It's applied to in this case, liberals versus conservatives, kind of situation. So it's sort of like wanting to put an end to, to that kind of, to that other side, instead of trying to create a dynamic balance, because I think it's a pipe dream to believe that everybody's going to come under one belief system. It's not necessarily true of the human race, but there are some things that generally people agree upon. Like I think about Europe and how some of the European countries have been able to sustain a socialistic type of governance for a considerable amount of time. And from my perspective, it might not be everybody there's perspective, it's basically one of saying, hey, when we're all taken care of with our basic needs, a basic need for education, for health, having food on the table, when we're all taken care of for those basic needs, everybody is better off. There's less crime, there's less struggles and fights and whatnot. So, I think that if we can try to come to that place in the United States, it would be wonderful. Not that we'd all agree. I mean, I've met people who are from Scandinavian countries. The first thing they'll say was, oh, but the taxes are so high. Well, yes, but, I would rather pay high taxes and have us all be better off than be either the rich man in the mansion in the hill or the poor person in the cardboard hovel on the streets, or somewhere even in between. I'd rather we all were better off. We don't all need to have McMansions.
Right. And how do it's funny as you say that, it's like what comes to my mind is the nodes. How do you think the nodes now play into a factor of speaking the truth? I mean, the Gemini Sagittarius node is one of, on one end, unbridled, unedited, boundless amounts of information, and on the other side, almost can be dictatorial in what information is being shared, right?
Well, it's my neighborhood, and this is what we believe, and so, if you believe differently, you don't belong here.
Get out of here, y'all are my people.
Oh no, in some of the newscasts that I watch on television, I hear a lot on radio. It's really uplifting to see that that there are many people of mixed races in those Black Lives Matter marches, and that is very uplifting. And thinking of those marches too, and counter marches, like the people that are supporting Trump being in marches. The other day, I was something I stumbled on Facebook, and I thought, why am I watching this? And it was a march across the Golden Gate Bridge, and I recognized the terrain. and the Trumpers were marching, and there was one guy with the microphone, and evidently, and I didn't see the whole thing, there were people from Antifa who were heckling them, and some of them being arrested by the police. The police were there involved in it. The person that had the microphone, though, I was listening to his speech, because it's sort of like, this goes back to the fake news thing. It's sort of like, how do we know what somebody is saying is true or false? And so I had to kind of self-examine on that level. And what I noticed was that the person with the microphone was heckling and putting down, criticizing, let me not erase the word heckling.
Denigrating.
He was, yes, but he was criticizing and describing, and the words that he was using, and I didn't even want to remember them at the time, but I just noticed, I thought, if for the kind of things that he said, he was not representative of the kind of person I would take seriously. Right. And so I added, it's sort of like one of the things you look for is what do you know about history, and usually relying on people with large credibility, that have become professors in colleges, for example, or have been, their works have been supported and seem rational, and you read counter to some of them, and at least you can kind of sift through what are the facts versus the opinions. And there's certain languaging that sometimes tells you facts versus opinions. Of course, with fake news, and we have a president who's pretty good at calling things fake news, you don't use opinions so much. You do a little bit, but not so much. But it's sort of like people who want, from my experience, people who want to convey factual information to you don't get so emotionally involved in it. And certain circumstances maybe so, but usually not. And I mean, there's a kind of a tone that can be a clue. Wait a minute, what's going on here? And so in the campaign, even if you listen to people who are pro-Trump versus people that are pro-Biden, or even listen to Biden versus Trump, there's a whole different level of tone quality. I call it tone quality. That's kind of like, okay, why is that person agitated, or why is that person criticizing? Because both have criticized the other.
Right.
And so it's like how they're criticizing, which, that to me, because I have I've said this before, I think I've said it on Zoom, I've said it on Moonwise, on KSFR. I have some basic principles I live by. Is this good for me? Is it good for others? And is it good for the planet? And if you're going to criticize somebody, and God knows we all have times in our lives when we deserve a little criticism, as children and as adults as well. And yet how that's done and how it's said is, really is like, in terms of making the difference between that was fake criticism, or that was over the top criticism. There may be a kernel of truth there, but where is it? Just like Trump was, brought fake news front and center with the last election in his campaigning. And I used to say, he's partly right.
Yeah.
And how I saw him as partly right was, often the news is depending on the source, is truncated. So you don't get a full picture. They've got these 5 minutes to do this, or 2 minutes to do that story, and whatever. So there's a lot packed into those sentences that you really go, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure how to see this. And then, of course, if you're really wanting to go after the truth, you're going to dig deeper. You're going to go to sources who write in depth about some of the stuff that's going on. You're going to find, of course, I think these days people need college professors who've written books that they respect.
Right.
To read. Anyway.
Well, it's funny when you say that, because again, I think I go back to the nodes, because I think of, the previous nodes were the Cancer Capricorn, right? And so that's very security based. And I think, I don't know if you ever saw the movie V for Vendetta, but it was based on the Fox episode back with the Parliament. But it's this idea, that in order to sell your citizenry the idea that they need safety, you need to create an unsafe situation. And then once you create a safe situation for them, it's very easy to then take their rights away in the guise of protecting them. And I think that's what we're seeing played out right now, is this, especially Trump lately with this, well, in Biden's America, there's going to be lawlessness, there's going to be this, and there's going to be marches, and there's going to be protests, and there's going to be fighting, and there's going to be a virus. Like, isn't that kind of what's going on right now on your watch, Mr. President? I mean, that right away is
That is
just
what's so puzzling to me that, well, it's not really puzzling. He's masterful in
redirecting.
redirecting, but you're going, but that's what's happening, I mean,
Right. Like,
this,
wait, am I missing something?
you've not been able, you're telling us that a year from now, all of these demonstrations and rioting and stealing and whatnot are going to go away. But well, you've got the opportunity to make them go away right now. There's before now and the time you leave office is almost, well, it's a little, maybe a month or two short. I'm not going to do the math, but for the time frame that you're talking about changing what's going on already. I mean, it's like, this is where critical thinking becomes really important when faced with fake news.
But I don't think critical thinking comes into this, because what this is basically is armchair government. This is like, I'm sitting in my armchair watching the news, and I'm going to make declarations about what needs to happen in the world. And I mean, that's kind of what we've got as a president right now.
Well, this is Gemini North node that you're talking about. I've said it, therefore it is.
Right. Oh, let me repeat myself so you know it's really true.
Oh dear.
So I mean, I guess the thing is, it's really, I mean, one of the things that we want to do with this, our conversations here is, kind of like giving people some skill sets. And so, I mean, for me, when I hear news, I mean, first of all, I think truth has a resonance to it. I think when people speak truthfully to us, I think there's something that we can feel either in our hearts, in our minds, somewhere in our being, that where we kind of know it's true. Some people are really masterful and gifted at completely manipulating people. People have really strong, Pluto Mercury combinations, or Pluto Mercury Neptune combinations. I mean, they could sell ice to Eskimos, they can sell barbecues to people in hell, and have lines waiting for them because they're just gifted in that way. But for the vast majority of people, there's an energetic thing too. What do you notice something? I mean, like, my eyes water sometimes when someone's telling me something and I know there's truth to it. Do you have any examples of when you hear truth?
Yeah, there's a resonance. There's definitely a resonance that goes on. But I was thinking about the salespeople, and how they can hook you very easily if you're into something. And there's a part of while you were saying all of that, I was thinking there's a part of many humans, if not all, hopefully, I would hope, I used to think it was all, but now I wonder, where we want to take what people say to us as truthful, unless there's some teasing, playing around, where you kind of but usually that gets blown after a while. I mean, that's one way of, it's a kind of a fun sort of thing, or just to see certain people's reactions and then tell them, oh, that's not true at all. But basically, when we're sitting down and having serious conversations, like, hey, I'm listening to the President of the United States, or I'm listening to the boss of this organization, or I'm listening to a customer who just came in to a store that I work at, or I'm a customer coming in and the store person is going to tell me something. Well, I kind of know for sure, if I'm in a store that's selling specialty items, that they're going to say good things about those items, and I'm going to need to ask them some really pointed questions,
Right,
to be satisfied. And I'm thinking, like, going in, why should I buy this iPhone and not that iPhone, or this pad or tablet or the other one? And if you go not to one of their stores, but you go to some place like Best Buy or something, and you're going to ask a lot of pointed questions to know, what's the difference, and then make up your own mind. And some of them may have a preference, or they may be wanting to push an item, but you can, this again, we boil down to being able to recognize circumstances we're in. We know that politicians, no matter what party they belong to, are going to spin some things.
Right.
As somebody said during this crazy time, it may have been a year ago, I don't remember. I heard this on some talk show. You know, all presidents lie. And when I heard that, I thought, yeah, that's more than true. But usually it's one of these, you know, what would be the equivalent of a kid's white, you know, lie, you know, like, yes, I cleaned my room or whatever kind of thing. Not
Oh yeah, I
really.
did my homework.
Yeah, right. Because you know, based on this country now, I can understand why presidents say what they say sometimes, because it's sort of to keep a certain level of peace and commonality. But in a way, wouldn't it be refreshing to have leaders who didn't lie?
Well, I
Which
mean,
would mean we would have to hear some things that we don't want to hear.
well, it's really, I mean, when you say that, you know, it's really funny because in a way, you know, we have a president right now who doesn't think he does. And that's, you know, that's, I mean, his whole platform is basically, I mean, that's kind of like the interesting thing about fake news and this, you know, and then the duality of the Gemini, you know, when we talk about the
Yeah, well,
Gemini.
he's a Gemini. I was just thinking, I'm thinking, this is funny. We've been talking about Gemini North Node,
I
and he
know.
has a Gemini North Node. He was born with this
I have
configuration.
it too. I'm guilty.
Yeah. Every 18 to 19 years we have
Exactly.
nodes.
But it's interesting because I mean that's the other aspect of the Gemini Sagittarian thing is that, you know, in that sense of it can believe, Sagittarius can believe that it's really espousing like the capital T for truth, but it's really only the personal truth. And, you know, because there's an aggrandizement that can happen with that, you know, there's this thing of like, oh, well, you know, I must be the one, I'm the one here to, you know, to share this great idea. And if I don't share it, then, you know, no one will know, you know, this.
Yeah, but you know, Gemini, I mean, Gemini may have their own great ideas, but I often think the challenge, you know, with the sign of Gemini, there's often that thing of, you know, jack of all trades and master of none. And, you know, when you look at the glyph for Gemini, it's like two straight lines with the bar above them connecting and a bar underneath them. And it's sort of like, you know, stay in this middle zone, you know, everything in your local or reach or whatever. And that's where the many different things become part of their skill level. But I think that the challenge for Gemini is to actually go deep or go high, which is to rise above those bars at the top and at the bottom. And there are Geminis throughout history who have done this. So the one who always comes to mind for me is Yeats.
Mm.
And his poetry and his wisdom. And, you know, of course, he wrote this book called Vision, which is about the moon cycles, which a few astrologers have attempted, Martin Goldsmith being one, who's a frequent guest on Moonwise, to attempted to do their version of. And there's a couple of other people who did another one. Can't remember one of their names, so I won't say it. And that's a kind of remarkable, he did this whole system of the moon cycles that was kind of in poetry and in a vision, it was as if he was in trance in writing this. But, you know, to come up with the poetry, whether it was metaphysical or not, in some cases, yes, that he did, took an incredibly deep dive into understanding certain phenomenon in the world he lived in. In this case, the moon cycles and the heavens and what's going on and what is this about? What is it telling us? And
well, that is the gift of Gemini is that Sagittarius, the polarity of Sagittarius to kind of like rise it above to take the many, you know, the other way they talk about Gemini is the dictionary and Sagittarius being the encyclopedia, you know, so it's like you get all those little experiences, then you go like, oh, where do I want to gravitate, right? Where is my truth? Where is it that I resonate in a way? Because yeah, I can be great at all these little things, which are really wonderful, but where am I going to find meaning? Where am I going to find happiness? It's like the hummingbird that finally is like, is finally getting sated, it's had enough nectar, and like, where do I want to rest now?
Well, we're going back to Trump too. I think for him, he, he's prided himself on his structures, all the hotels, et cetera, that he built. And I think that he's um, lost, he was seeking a certain height, but somehow or other, and this goes back to the fake information, his fake information is, I always think of like a 2-year-old when I see him, that he's stuck in those early stages.
Definitely.
And his parenting, his environment
Everything.
did not bring it, allowed him to be in this, he got away with it or whatever, and he's used it throughout his life. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I've studied some psychology, different sorts, and basically, and I've read what some have had to say about him, and I'd say, yeah, I mean, he's psychologically wounded, but he has that of all the Geminis I know, and I know quite a few Geminis, uh, I would I would say he has that aspiration to go high. And I mean, even his skyscraper buildings, these tall buildings. I mean, yeah, he has this aspiration to go
Even
high.
that flap of hair.
Yeah. But is he doing it in an honest, truthful manner? And
But
this,
that's probably that's when I think about soul wise. I think that's probably a Gemini's lesson to learn along the way, is the importance of one's words matching who one is. And I don't think he's not had to learn that lesson yet this lifetime.
uh,
The
or
consequences of that lesson, I guess, is
is
probably
he
the better word.
capable of learning?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is his life hasn't required that of him yet, clearly. I mean, because to get away with to such extent as he has shows clearly that he hasn't had the consequences of those. Like most of us suffer consequences that, it's kind of like, like how a dog gets treated, you get a smack on the face with a newspaper. I mean, that's kind of what life does to you every once in a while. You're like, after a couple times, you get like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. But, he goes on, he opens up another thing and it fails and someone bails him out of it. And then he goes open up something else and it fails and someone else bails it out. And it's just like he leaves a long trail. But for some reason there, he continually has a group of people who are willing to show up and clean up his mess. I mean, he has like a little interstellar, cleanup crew that the only thing I can think of is because the karmic thing he's doing for the planet.
Well, there's this thing about, his definitely not wanting to leave the White House. And even there have been allusions to that. Well, even if he lost, he said something to the effect that made people think that he might not leave. And part of that may be that the state of New York will have a subpoena for him and he'll be under arrest. And he might not be able to get out of that one.
Right. I mean, I've seen it all.
He may have the opportunity to learn that lesson. And what he does, from my perspective of we human beings and our souls, that would be a gift to him.
It would be.
That's true. I'm not being sarcastic.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
To him,
No, I
as
agree.
a person developing here on the human plane, it would be a total gift.
No, I agree. And I mean, I think, with the Jupiter Pluto thing that's going on, with the conjunctions that are going on, the grab for power. I mean, I've said it since last year. I mean, I think they're either going to have to rip him out of the White House or they're going to have to make him some incredible offer, which I've heard is possible, that they're working on making an offer where he won't be liable, but, for any of these lawsuits. But the truth is, if they do that, then I'd be willing to I mean, I don't even have to guarantee it. I just know that there will be people who will take it upon themselves to self-correct that issue, because he has screwed so many people. And for those people to see him walk without having to pay for it, I don't think he'll be able to walk away from that one. Literally.
Well, it would be a little, I just can't envision it. I would think that, I guess it's the Marines who guard the White House, that they would escort or carry him out. So,
I think we're going to see. I mean, we've already seen how the office can be so indignified, and I think we have yet to see how much farther that can go. I'm sad to say.
yeah.
And that's, I mean, in the sense of fake news. I mean, fake news is an aspect of fake news is drama. I mean, it's entertainment. I mean, this is a man who loves entertaining people. You watch him at the podium now. I mean, he's, you know, first of all, I mean, he can't really stand very long, and he's having walking issues, which no one really talks about. But I mean, he's leaning on that podium like it's his drunken best friend. I mean, I've never seen someone assume such a casual manner having that level of status on the planet. I mean, it's very egregious. It's very disconcerting.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
No honor. No
he's
honor.
he's certainly made us look at spin or fake news in many different ways. Thank you, Donald Trump, and considering the sign of Gemini also in different ways. Of course, he is a Leo rising, and that's where, you know, he likes to appear in a kingly manner, and yet talk about the fakeness of that. What he did in his acceptance speech using the White House as he was, I was, I don't know, happy or assured on some level when even Republican pundits were not pleased with the use of the White House in that manner. But, you know, that's sort of a kingly action. It's my palace. I can do as I please with it, not a sense of this belongs to the people of the United States. I mean, and the first time I went to Washington, D.C., that was one of the first things I saw was the inside of the White House.
And you know, it's funny, you know, when the Republicans talk about how wonderful Reagan was, and I mean, Reagan was one of the last presidents as a Republican who was really clear that, you know, this is the people's house. This is not my home. This is the people's home. But I think, you know, I think we've talked enough about fake news, and I want to thank you, Merrylin, for joining us today and talking about this. And for those of you connecting with us on our deep dives, new deep dives with new perspectives, please do a thumbs up, like us, subscribe, share. I'm Michael Bartlett in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You can reach me at 505-690-3860, or my website is coremichael.com. Merrylin.
Hi, yeah, I'm Merrylin LeBlanc, also here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I do a show on KSFR 101.1 FM in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but streaming on the web at ksfr.org called Moonwise, and you can always stream it or listen to the podcast, which you can access on that website, ksfr.org. I also do what's called the Moon Minute, which airs at 5:30 in the morning, but those also are podcasts as well. You can reach me at Moonwise at ksfr.org or call me at 505-690-1878. Thank you, Michael, and thank you all for listening.
Have a great day.